This is that final video of that guest room cabinet that I am building. And I had stacked that extra lumber I had to bring up by the wood stove for a couple of weeks now, and it was time to bring it back down. It was good and dry and ready to start cutting up for the final parts. Now, this piece here is for the front of the pull-out desk. It's just going to be the front fascia of it, and this other piece here is a little bit wider. It's going to be the drawer front for the top drawer there. Now you can see actually this piece was a little bit wider than my joiner. I wanted to keep the drawer one piece, and I had to have it really nice and perfectly flat, so it still fit between the cover and the fence. So I just jointed the one flat face of that there. It was 8¼ inches, I think, and just went back with a hand plane to clean that lip off, so I could just do a second pass of it to make sure that was really good and flat. This was the only way I could figure out doing it because it was a little bit longer than the router sled that I had made. So I got that hand planed off, and then I just went back and I ran it the other way there just to make sure that I had a really nice flat surface on it. And there you can see it's hanging off again, but luckily they have that rabbit edge lip there, so it doesn't get in the way as long as you remove it. So there's the second pass, and I just went back and I quickly cleaned that up with a hand plane to make it nice and flat. So you can see I do actually own a couple hand planes, but I rarely use them unless I run into something like this. So then now it's time to run these pieces through the planer to get them down to the final thickness. And it's easiest, best if you just butt them end to end when you run through the planer. You reduce snipe on one end of the board by doing that. And then I jointed the one face of them and one edge of them, and now I'm just going back and ripping. This is the front piece for the pull-out desk unit, and I just ripped that to the proper width, and now I'm just cutting it to length. And the ends of this have chamfers on them to actually match the existing two cabinets that I built in there already. So you can see what I do is I just take a piece of plywood and use that to square it up and push it through so that I don't get tear out on the end grains. And I machine the end grains first, and then I'll go back and do the longer sides like this. So that all machined, it's easy now to get everything, lined up, and just kind of held it in place and put some marks on it so I knew where it had to be glued into the onto the front of this desk here. So then it's just a matter of doing a standard simple glue up, and as always I use this Titebond 3 here, and just gonna spread it on the two parts. And then I have those little silicone brushes that I use to get it spread out nicely with. And they are real handy because you just use them over and over again. And there you can see how that pocket for the finger pull is actually going to be hidden once the front plate here just goes on it. So first I spread the glue on the one side, and then I put some glue on the other piece and kind of lined everything up according to the marks that I had previously put on when I test fit it. And now it's time to just clamp it in place. And this just allowed me to get to hide the hinges easily, and get a really nice gap on all the front parts by doing it this way. And then you can always never have enough clamps, so I threw a couple extra clamps on the top here to hold it while it dries. So about an hour later I was able to just remove the clamps and then just kind of slide it back in place there and test fit it and make sure all the gaps were right and stuff. And you can see it, it kind of goes right in there just like the nightstands do. So it's a perfect fit. And then it's time, now that I know everything's gonna be perfect, it's time to put some finish on this. So I'm gonna do the final sanding here. I just sanded up to about 220 grit, and then I'm using that same Minwax polyacrylic. And someday I have to make up some kind of a spray booth for this because it does take a long time to brush it on, and it's hard to get rid of drips and runs and stuff like that. But for now I'm just using a brush here and trying to get 3 good coats on everything. So what I do is I just coat both sides with one coat, and then I take and I sand between the coats, and I just use the 320 grit in the orbital sander there to give the next coat good adhesion and get rid of any imperfections or anything in it, because it is a water-based finish and it does raise the grain. So while that's drying, I decided to start doing the final sizing of the drawer front. And this is that piece that was a little over 8 inches. And actually, I just cut it down to 8 inches. Perfect. So, I really could have squeezed it in, but I didn't want to take the chance. So I got that cut to width and length. And then the same thing, it has the same chamfer all around the outside edge. And you see I use another piece of plywood there just for a little backup board to keep it tearing out. And I do the cross grain first, just so that I don't have any rip out and I get nice sharp corners when I'm done. And I'm still trying to decide what router table to go with to replace this old Harbor Freight unit. The aluminum is just so flexible and so noisy, you can kind of hear the router just shakes it, and it's not a real good table, but I mean it does work for now. So I got those edges all chamfered. Now it's time to go back, and the same thing, the drawer front's going to get 3 coats of the Minwax on both sides of it. And while that's drying up, I just going back to drill some holes in the front of the drawer for the mounting screws. I decided with a drawer front this big and I wanted to keep it nice and flat, I'd go with 6 screws. So I just I marked them out evenly spaced, and then I'm just going to drill the holes here with a backing board on the inside just to help prevent any kind of tear out on the inside. And now it's time to put the drawer front on, and I had 2 stainless steel rulers that were exactly 30 thousandths thick each, so I stacked them up for my 60 thousandths spacing on the bottom there. And then I just kind of eyeballed the side to side spacing to match the desk down below there, and threw one clamp on it just to hold it until I got it mounted in place. So once everything was lined up perfectly, I just went back and was able to throw 2 screws in just to double check everything. And it was really easy being able to remove the top on this. I didn't have to mess with the double-sided tape or anything that I usually do. And you can see I pretty much use those Craig screws for everything also. They're just a nice working screw that doesn't split anything and that holds real good. So there it is. The front's on there and seems to be lined up good. Everything works good. So now I can go back and put the rest of the screws in. Now making the drawer with the removable front on it always seems to be the easiest thing for me to do. It gives me a nice alignment in the end when everything's put together. And then I got the hinges for the doors, and you can see these hinges will work for a full overlay, a half overlay, or a full inset, and I'm going to be using them for an inset. So this is what they look like, and I picked these up at Home Depot, and just to make sure how they're going to work out, I just took a couple pieces to mock it up because I need that chamfer to come out pretty much flush with the edge of the front of the cabinet there. And so this is pretty much how they work, and you can see they let a full inset door go out of the way so my drawer will be able to slide out under it. So this is just a quick mock-up so I know where I stand later. And now I can get the final dimensions off the cabinet for making the 2 doors that go on there. So I just kind of like to wait till everything's done and adjust everything accordingly. So I brought down some more of that lumber I had upstairs, and you can see I got rid of that big DeWalt miter saw and I replaced it with this Evolution here. And the actually sawdust bin I had built for it worked perfect with this one too. So I do have a lot more room in my shop now. And this Evolution saw, it does work good, but I really don't like the type of cut it does on wood. This blade that came with it is nowhere near as good as the one on the other Evolution saw that I have. They took some teeth out of it. It just kind of gives you a splintery cut in wood. And there you can see the laser. That works really good. I've been using that a lot. But I'm just using this for rough cutting right now, and I'll show you I did change the blade around later. So now I've got the door front parts just kind of roughed out the size, and I'm going to go back and start joining them and planing them and everything. These all have to be really perfectly flat to come out with nice doors in the end. So I do actually have a couple extra parts here, and later I'll be going back and just trimming out the best pieces. And then, from the joiner over to the planer. And with rough cut wood, the different pieces are not always identical in thickness, you can see. So I always start with the thickest ones and then work my way down to the final dimension, trying to run them all through at the the same settings. And once they start getting down there, you can see they start out around 1 inch thick, and now I just need them to be exactly 3/4. And like I said before, it's best if you can butt them to get rid of the snipe on two ends on the back end of the one board and the front end of the other. So I did a couple passes through here through the planer, and got them down to the 3/4 inch, and then it's time to go back and square up one edge, so I can start ripping them to the proper width. And I find the joiner to be one of the most useful tools in the shop, so that you wind up with everything perfect square and nice looking at the end. And so there it is. I did cut some extra ones so I could go back through and kind of pick out the grain matches and stuff like that for the door panels. And then it's time to start ripping them down to the proper widths for the door parts. Now you can see I made that little sawdust shield a while back, and that does work good if you can get it in place and it works with the width of the boards that you have. So it's just a matter of I'm trying to get rid of any of the darker wood here. You can see I'm pretty much trying to get down to all the pure white pieces with a fairly similar grain. So I did start out with a lot of extra parts, and I did wind up with a lot of extra firewood in the end. So they're the pieces that I picked out finally to make the door parts with. And then I decided I was going to miter the corners of this. So first thing I did was get out that miter set gauge, and this thing has just really been so helpful around the shop. It helps me get perfect cuts first time, so I really do recommend one of these things. So I get the miter gauge set up at my 45 there and start doing the first cuts on one end of them. And there again, you can see that little plastic extension I put on the corner of the table, so it really helps when you're got overhanging stuff like this. It does make a really big difference, and basically it doesn't really get in the way. So I cut the one side of them, then I just went back and put a stop on there, and was able to cut the four shorter cross pieces to that length, and then I went back and moved the stop, put a different one on there a little longer for the uprights. This is where you only get one chance to get it right, so you want to make sure these dimensions are proper, because you've got 3 gaps here that you're dealing with and stuff. And they're the corner miters, and now I want the same chamfer to be on the inside of the door parts here. So what I'm going to do is put them on before I glue it up. That way I'll get nice matching corners, how they match together. And then on the back side of them, I'm actually going to I was going to put glass panels in there, but we changed our mind in the end, and there's how they fit together. So I'm just going to set up the dado head there and cut some grooves in the back side there for the panels that are going to be inserted. And like I said, I was gonna put some of that frosted glass with chicken wire in it, panels in the bottom, just for the look, until I found out it was gonna cost me $300 to have to buy the 2 pieces that would be cut and shipped to me. So we did change our mind on that, and I'll show you in a little while what my wife decided, she'd like. So I got the set up once and then ran all the rabbits on the back there, and that just took a couple minutes there. And then it's time to go back and start the glue up on it. Now, doors can be tricky when you're using miter joints in them to glue up, and about the weakest joint that you can use for glue is a end grain type joint, because the glue soaks in so fast and stuff like that. So you want to make sure you've got a good coating of glue on them before you start. And you can see I use this clamp up board to get everything square and actually keep the miters aligned perfectly in the corner so the doors come out the right size. And then I also have the I can also clamp down to this board here to hold everything perfectly flat too while it's being assembled. So I got the first one all clamped up there, you can see, and came out nice, square, flat, and everything else. So I'm real happy with it. And this is what the door is going to look like. Now at this point, it's really a very weak door because of the corner construction, but I'll show you in a little while what I'm going to do. And then there's the second one. So now to reinforce all the corners, what I'm doing is I'm just going to put a spline across them. I kind of like the look of the splines, and they're real quick and easy to do with a table saw. So I just set up a 1/4 inch dado head on there, the dado cutter, and took this little jig that I have for the table saw and set that up on the 45-degree angle to hold everything and make it really safe to take a deep cut like that and to get a nice clean cut. And then just go through and just cut the location for the spline. So I got the first one done, and then it's just time to go back through once everything's set up. It's a really quick, simple job, and there's what it looks like. It's a pretty big spline going in there. This jig really does make it a lot safer to do stuff like this, and a lot easier to get nice consistency as you're cutting them out. And I find this to be I think it's kind of the easiest way to reinforce a miter joint, and it does look good in the end. Then I have to go back and just cut the spline material, and I took a piece of the scrap that I had and just used the bandsaw to set up the gauge. And I had to use a couple wooden blocks here because the fence was just too high. So there you can see how they're going to fit in there. So I got the thickness, just right on them, and now it's time to go back and cut them. So I'm just using that Evolution saw to trim them down, and put a piece of plywood on the table to make it a little safer and get a cleaner cut. But still, I was not happy with the cut I was getting with this blade. Just kind of wandered and stuff like that. Did a lot of tear out on the wood. But these are way oversized, so I can live with it. It's not a problem. And when you're cutting something that's kind of like caught in a corner like that, you really want to make sure that the saw stays down until the blade just about stops before you raise it, so nothing goes flying. So I just took a couple of minutes to cut the 8 parts, and there you kind of see how wavy and splintered it comes out with that Evolution blade. So I don't really recommend that one for wood. And now it's time to go back and glue them in there. So first thing you do is get some good layer of glue in the slot there, and just use a thin piece of wood to make sure it's evenly spread in there so everything's got a good coating on it. And then the same thing on the part there, the spline that's going in. Put a coat on there, and a lot of it will slide off when you push it in, but at least it started out with some glue on it. And then you just have to kind of push them in and really push them hard, and just rock them back and forth, slide them back and forth to get the extra glue out, so that wind up with a nice tight fit after you go back and sand them later. And there you can see I've got like about a 1/8 of an inch extra sticking out there to sand off later. So now it's just time to go back and glue in the 8 of them. In the meantime, while the glue was drying, I decided to try that old Freud fusion blade that I didn't like on my table saw because it burned and rip cuts, and I put it on the Evolution here just to do some test cuts. It's too thick for it. It's a full curve, but first thing I noticed is look at that glass smooth cut. So it's definitely not the saw. The saw is does a good job of cutting with a good blade on it. And there you can see perfect cut. So I decided to order the Evolution blade to see how that worked out. So there I've got everything all the splines glued in, let them dry, and took them over to this edge sander here. And I think this is my favorite tool in the shop now. It's just such a great way to be able to clean up stuff like this, and it just runs so nice and smooth, and still using the first belt on it there, and I've done a lot of work with it and stuff, so I'm really happy with it. It allows you to just get everything nice straight in line and just perfectly flush without taking too much off of the frame, because size really does matter at this point, because I'm trying to keep the gaps all around it. So this does it does take that extra 1/8 inch off really quick, and did the first door, and then time to just go back and do the second one. About the only thing with it is the dust collection is not the best, but it's still not that bad once you get that dust thing in the right place in the back there. Now they're pretty much done, and time to go back and just do some of the final sanding to get rid of any of the extra glue or any mess that I had there, pencil marks and stuff like that. So then it's time to do the outside chamfer on it to match the drawer fronts and everything else. And I didn't use a backup block on this because it's just kind of it's 45s at the corner there, so I didn't see any tear out. And I just did 2 passes just to make sure I had a nice clean cut. So the doors actually went pretty quick, and there you can see they're just kind of clamped in place for now, just to test fit everything and check the gaps. And same thing, it's time now to go back and do 3 coats of the polyacrylic on both sides of everything. Kind of like a love-hate relationship using this polyacrylic, but it does work. And the Evolution blade came 2 days later, so I decided to just throw it on here and just show you a quick video of how it worked. So this Freud blade actually would have worked good, but you can see I had to flip that little washer over for the 1-inch arbor again. But the Freud blade was too wide a kerf. It was like a .135 kerf, and this saw really not made to handle that. So the Evolution blade, it took 2 seconds to switch that around and get it back on, and just decided to do a couple cuts to show you. And it does cut really, nice and quickly, no strain on the saw or anything, and it does a pretty nice job here. It's not quite the same quality of cut as that Freud blade was, but this also isn't a $100 blade either, so I'm real happy with it. So it looks like that's going to be the best solution if you're going to use this saw for any kind of woodworking, would be to have a second blade. And I just took a piece of walnut to go back and try to cut a wider blade and just see how the blade reacts. And it did cut nice, clean, square. The only thing was there was a little bit of, you can see just some little tiny bits of chatter from the teeth marks, but nothing major. So I think the best thing to do is make sure you get if you're going to do any kind of woodworking with this saw, just make sure you get a blade to match up for the woodworking end of it. And then I just decided to try a piece of plywood, because that's usually the worst when you cut that for splintering out and stuff like that. And it did a good job on that. And you can see there's just some really fine fuzz like on the edge of it, but so it's actually a winner for this saw, I think. And now it's time to go back through and put the hinges on. So first thing I did is I used that sample piece I made up to get the locations, and then I marked them out on the door and some masking tape there, and just drill the pilot holes for them. Now for the first two screws on each hinge, I'm using the slotted holes. There were 2 slotted holes and 2 fixed holes, and I figured I'd just put the screws in the slotted holes first so I could do my really final alignment during the assembly there and slide them around a little bit. And once everything was locked in place, I could go back and do the other 2 screws on each hinge, just to make sure it won't move later. Now there are some of those 32 millimeter type hinges that you bore a pocket in the door with and stuff that would also work for this application, but I really don't have the equipment to put them in place and didn't want to mess around with them, so I figured these hinges would be the best for me. So I got the door located and put some spacers there for the gaps and stuff, and went back and started marking the holes for the location of the 2 slots on each hinge in the side of the carcass there. And you had the 2 different hole locations, and one is further forward than the other one, so had to use 2 different settings, and the square there makes it easy to mark everything for when you're doing things over and over again. And then just went back when I drilled some pilot holes, and you can see I put some masking tape on the drill just so I knew how deep to go and I wouldn't drill through the other side, because that would really look terrible. So now it's time to go back through and just pull that tape off, and I find that helps once you've got a finished product to make it easy to mark on it without being permanent, and to be able to move around layout marks till you get what you want. So I'm just going to open the hinges up here to make it easier to get in and put the screws in, and then here we go, the 2 slotted screws for the preliminary adjustment. So you can see the hinges do stick in a ways, but they actually do allow the door to get back far enough so my little shelf will be able to pull out in there, and that was really why I wanted to use this type of hinge. And then it was a matter of getting all the gaps adjusted and getting everything working right. And they worked out really good there, you can see. So now they're both installed and ready to put the final screws in there. So I'm just going back now and drilling through the fixed holes to lock everything in place. It just turned out to be really easy to install. I was real happy with them. I'll definitely use them in other projects in the future. And there you can see the doors open a little past 90, and perfect clearance to pull out my shelf there. So everything's gonna work out good, and they go right in under the pull-out desktop. And now you have to cut some panels to insert in the doors here. And this is where we actually decided to use some material for the inserts instead of going with that glass I wanted to use. So we had some extra pillow shams left over, and I just put a coat of that polyurethane on these panels too, to kind of help keep the glue from sticking in. But I bought a can of adhesive that's supposed to be good. It's contact adhesive that's supposed to work with fabric to try. And I decided to just try a couple little pieces before I, decided to go this way with the panels to make sure it would work out. But this was an extra pillow sham that we had gotten with our bedding set for up there. My wife thought it would work out nice to have everything matching in there. So, I tried to glue. You spray it on, you let it dry for about 15 minutes, and once it's dry, you just stick it together. And actually, it stuck together good, no problems of bleed through or anything. So, looked like it was going to work out, and we're going to head in this direction now. So I'm going to use the front of the pillowcase, which is this material here, and then the solid gray is going to be the inside of the door. And one last thing to go back and do. I got everything pretty much finished now and ready to go on to the next step. But you can see there's the drawer, there's a shelf, and then there's this pull-out tray, and then there's the 2 doors and the actual live edge top, natural edge top. So there are a lot of parts to it. And I did save putting this little chamfer on the front corner of the carcass until last, just in case I nicked it or dinged it or anything. I figured it'd be easy to get damaged, so I just went back and put that on last minute and did a little bit of sanding, and then went back and put 3 coats on that front face frame of it there, so everything would have a good coating on it. And then it was time to start sanding everything, and I just sanded it all with 320, and then I went to 600 on this, and then I put some wax on it. In the meantime, the drawer pulls finally came. I picked these up off of Amazon. They're stainless steel machined, real industrial looking pull, and they were reasonably priced and stuff. And I decided to go with that look. That's kind of look I've been heading in the room. And I just waited till they got there to get the final measurements to make sure I drilled the holes in the right position. So I stood the drawer up on end, got everything marked out there, centered, and put a little backup board inside there just so they wouldn't splinter out when I drilled them, and got them drilled with the 2 handles centered right over the doors that go below. And the little counter bore in the back there, so I just took that Craig drill with the step drill on there and put the stop up by the tip of it there to allow me to get constant, the same depth on all my holes. So that worked out pretty good, just to make it so that the screws were long enough. And then, as with any other pull, just put the screws in, tighten them up, and you're done. And I got that done. I went back and I did a little more waxing on that after get the fingerprints off, and then it's time to finish up the doors. And I just lined everything up, and you can see I used masking tape for marking out everything. Went back and drilled out the holes, and I had to use some shorter screws than came with the drawer pulls. And then went back and I did the sanding on this also before putting them on, and did a good coat of wax on everything. Got sanded with 320, then 600 grit, and then I just went with the wax. I didn't bother sanding with any finer grit because I really didn't see a difference, in the other things that I tried sanding down to the 2000 grit. The wax seems to make the biggest difference in this finish. So there's the top, and everything was actually sanded and waxed. It took me like 2 days to get it all, done, but it was worth it in the end. So there's the side of the carcass there. Now I'm just doing the final waxing on it. And then I moved it upstairs. I left it in pieces so it'll be easy to carry up. And you can see it lines up right under the TV there. And these are the pillow shams that came with the matching bedding set that I'm using for the panels now. So I had to cut them up. And my wife originally told me, don't use those cheap scissors. They won't cut. And sure enough, I found out they wouldn't. And I had to borrow her sewing scissors to cut this up. Now, I've never really tried anything like this before with a paneling set, and I'm not really sure how it's going to come out, but, it's worth a try because we really thought it would look good. So there's the front and the back, and then I had that Loctite adhesive. It's a one rated for fabric, and started by putting the back parts on first. And I took them outside because of the smell of this stuff, and I put 2 coats of the this Loctite on each piece, and then I let it sit for about 15 or 20 minutes until it was perfectly dry and ready to be stuck together. Then just a matter of flipping it over. You can see I stretched the fabric out on a piece of cardboard to spray it. That helped keep it from getting any wrinkles or anything in it after we ironed it good before, even starting this. And it looked like it's working pretty good. It wrapped it around the edge there. I wanted this inside edge wrapped, and there you can see a little bit of the glue bled through, but actually in the end it dried out, so you didn't see it. So that worked out good. So I got everything wrapped around and stuck to the edge there, and trimmed that one, and then it was time to do the other one. Same thing, threw 2 coats on the panel and let it dry. And the thing does have a problem with the nozzle. You do get some spurts that are like little blobs that form in there you have to watch for. And then the same thing, I wrapped it around the edge and then went back and trimmed it all so it was flush. And time to start the front now. This was a little more critical to get the pattern perfectly aligned from side to side, and from just being straight in line, because it so I had to really use tape to pull it perfectly straight on the pattern. And then the same thing, I just set the door on it and wrapped it around the sides there and trimmed it. Now with the second panel, it started raining actually before the glue dried, so I had to run up on the porch with everything to finish wrapping that one so it didn't get all wet. And there you can see the panels are all wrapped up and trimmed, and they really fit perfect. And I was surprised how good it looked. When you first walk in the room, it almost looks like a stainless steel panel in there until you look closely. And in the end, we're real happy the way the look came out. And here it is, basically all put together up in the room there. And there's my old Jim Beam liquor bottle on top of there, and you can see it's got that nice little pull-out work surface there. The guest wants to do any work or anything, and it's got a nice big drawer in the top there, and I think it worked out perfect. So you do have a place. I have to build a matching stool yet for it, but you do have a place if you want to set up a laptop or something in there now and work a little bit, and it should hold any of their clothes or anything in the end. And got a nice little pull-out drawer. You can throw a pocketbook or shoes or whatever on, and the luggage will fit probably in the bottom of it there, I'm guessing. So in the end, it looks like it's a good multi-purpose unit that should work out good. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe.